story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. I'm so right now.
Well, who wouldn't be? That is Amy Robach of ABC News caught talking off air about how her network refused to broadcast her exclusive interview with one of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Now, we only know about that video because it was leaked to a conservative news outlet, Project Veritas, which says it's proof that the liberal media has been covering up the Epstein scandal for years. On top of that alleged cover-up, there are experienced medical examiners out there who believe Epstein did not commit suicide, but was murdered. Now, we're going to be looking at that claim later in the show, but first, more of that leaked video.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it.
Today, we announce the unsealing of sex trafficking charges against Jeffrey Epstein.
Billionaire businessman Jeffrey Epstein was arrested in New York Saturday on federal charges related to sex trafficking.
Jeffrey Epstein, a politically connected financier, is now facing up to 45 years in prison.
This is the prime target prisoner in that prison. Name the one that's in more jeopardy than this guy.
Breaking news this hour, officials say multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein has taken his own life.
New reports are fueling the mystery around the death of Jeffrey Epstein.
Are you saying you don't think it was suicide?
I think that the evidence points toward homicide rather than suicide.
It's one of those things that, we could be talking about, like, who shot JFK. It could just be lasting forever.
Do I think he was killed? 100%. Yes, I do. He made his whole living blackmailing people. Yeah.
So to be clear, there are two questions here regarding arguably the world's richest convicted sex offender. Did he commit suicide or was he murdered? And secondly, was the story covered up by the ABC and others? Let's ask our panel now. And we are very fortunate to have with us once again a former acquaintance of Jeffrey Epstein, the New York journalist and author, Jessie Kornbluth. We're also joined by the high-profile attorney, Lisa Bloom, who represents a number of Epstein's alleged victims. Welcome, both of you, to The Nexus. Jessie, I'd like to start with you. The ABC presenter there saying her network wasn't interested in the story because nobody knew, and mind you, it's 2015, early 2016 perhaps, who Epstein was back then. Is that a fair reason to bat the story away?
Well, the question is who nobody is in her remark. If she means the very higher ups, it is possible that they didn't know and didn't know as a matter of routine, so that they would have deniability. But even then, not to know who Jeffrey Epstein was in 2016 when you're in the news business is basically journalistic malpractice.
Lisa, are you convinced by that argument?
No, not at all. I think the question is, what did ABC News have at that time in addition to Virginia Roberts' interview? Did they have corroboration? Did they have witnesses? Did they have evidence? Because a major news organization is never going to want to run a story accusing a very wealthy person of sex crimes unless they have something to back it up. They don't want to get sued. Now, Amy Robach in that clip says they did have that. If they did, then they have some pretty tough questions to answer as to why they didn't run the story.
That's right, and she seems to have rode back, and so has ABC, from that position at least. Look, here's what they say. At the time, not all of our reporting met our standards to air, but we have never stopped investigating the story. And Roback herself said, the interview itself, while I was disappointed it didn't air, didn't meet our standards. So when you listen to that little clip, Lisa, she seems to directly contradict herself.
Well, she still works at ABC, so she has to be careful. I've worked at ABC, I've worked at every major news organization, and I'm an attorney in Los Angeles representing a lot of victims now. And really the same standards apply to the journalists as apply to lawyers like me. We have to have something to back it up. So that's really the question. Now, even 3 years ago, there were a large number of victims who had already come out and accused Jeffrey Epstein. That's one factor corroborating Virginia Roberts' story. But Virginia doesn't just accuse Jeffrey Epstein, she accuses a number of other people, including Alan Dershowitz, Prince Andrew. And so, yes, ABC does have certain standards. The question is, what did they have at the time? If they had a lot of backup, why did they choose not to run the story?
Jesse, you've been in journalism for decades. As a managing editor, would you have moved with the story on the basis of what she said she had?
I would have wanted more. I wouldn't have killed it. But notice her remarks are all over the place. I mean, at one point she says they didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was. That's the thing I focus on. Did they or did they know that this was an important story, or did they just blow it off?
Lisa, you're representing a number of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged victims. I can only imagine that they see this clip and think, well, maybe the story could have broken 3 years ago instead of, we know, when Epstein was jailed only in July of this year.
Well, it's very upsetting. One of my clients says that she's very disturbed that a prominent and reliable news source that has the ethical responsibility of telling the truth would not report on the truth for any reason, let alone the heinous reason of Epstein yielding so much power and influence and wealth. And she goes on to say, it just goes to show how much power he had over institutions and people. And she doubts this will be the last time hear about somebody killing a story about Jeffrey Epstein.
So, Lisa, potentially, if the story had come out, say, 3 years ago, a number of your clients and others may have been spared some of his attention.
That's what's so critically important, because I work with my clients who were victims of Jeffrey Epstein every day and hear about the pain, the damage to their careers, their relationships, their sexuality, how this has affected them. This is a lifelong type of damage when we're talking about sexual abuse of girls or very young women. And if 3 years of that pain could have been spared by him being brought to justice earlier, it would have made a tremendous difference in their lives.
Lisa, thank you. Well, as we mentioned, we only know because the video was leaked to Project Veritas, a right-wing media outlet which prides itself on uncovering what they describe as liberal bias and corruption, often using disguises and hidden cameras. Here's Project Veritas's founder, James O'Keefe.
They're fine airing the allegations against maybe Brett Kavanaugh or Trump or anybody else. But when it comes to Bill Clinton and some of these folks that are mentioned by Amy in this hot mic tape, they say they just didn't have enough corroboration. I'm not sure how ABC News defines corroboration when it comes to credible witnesses talking about sexual assault.
Up to Jesse. Jesse, do you think there is a discernible bias there in the liberal media in willingness to go forward with the story?
I think it's really insulting to Lisa and me that we're even hearing this man's name. He's the lowest of the low. He's been arrested. I believe he's convicted. He's manipulated media to cut and create false videos.
Well, yeah, but that aside, in this particular case, he has the video, he's leaked it, and that's how we've come to know about it, Jesse.
In this particular case, he has a valid video. Everything he says is invalid.
Now, look, let's have a look at what Fox News has to say, which you might think is invalid as well.
This isn't being mentioned, but Hillary Clinton 3 years ago was in the midst of a presidential campaign. And if ABC drops a devastating blow against her husband in the midst of this campaign, that's going to blow back big on ABC News. Remember, they thought Hillary was going to win the White House, and they didn't want to jeopardize that relationship. They wanted to be on the right side of history. Now they're on the wrong side of history, and it's a tragedy if this is true.
That's what Jesse Watter of Fox was saying. Either of you want to come in on that?
Yeah.
I could weigh in on that. I mean, I think that's ridiculous. There were many negative stories about the Clintons during the 2016 campaign. The media harped on her missing emails nonstop over and over again. There were a lot of negative stories about Bill Clinton and women that he had been involved with. So I think that's absolutely absurd.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. You know, the Epstein alleged cover-up has some similarities to the Harvey Weinstein alleged cover-up. In place of Amy Robach, we have Ronan Farrow, and in place of ABC, we have NBC News. Now, Farrow accuses NBC of trying to quash his investigation into Weinstein and says that's why he left NBC to join The New Yorker magazine, where he and his team did break the story in 2017.
Look, you can judge for yourself. It's laid out in the book whether what we had was enough. We had a tape of Weinstein admitting to sexual assault. We had multiple named women in every version of this story. But that actually is not the point. The order to stop was unjournalistic. It was an inappropriate shutdown of explosive reporting we had, and we were concerned that people were going to continue to get hurt. This was a set of executives making these decisions, all the way up to our parent company.
Back up to Jesse in New York. Jesse, we have two New York journalists within months of each other complaining that their networks squash their stories on sexual predators in the city. I just have to ask you, what's going on?
Well, in the Weinstein case, you really can't fault Ronan Farrow. He is the gold standard. He's not a young producer. It is telling that months after he is rejected by NBC, he's accepted by The New Yorker, which has the most aggressive and thorough fact-checking operation in the history of journalism. It is hard to believe that in those few months, he did a bunch of interviews that corroborated his story.
Okay, Lisa, I don't want to put you on the spot here. You've come here for analysis and not to be the object of the story. However, in Ronan's book, which he references there in that soundbite, he says that you funneled information regarding his investigation to your client, Harvey Weinstein. Did you do that or not?
So this is absolutely false. And by the way, Ronan Farrow never ran his allegations about me by me, so I don't know about that fact checking. All I can say is I did briefly represent Harvey Weinstein back when he was an acclaimed film producer, when the Obamas sent their daughter, Malia, to intern for him, when he was friendly with Bill and Hillary Clinton and many other prominent people. Once he was accused of sexual assault, I immediately withdrew and resigned. So I can't comment much further than that, but I can tell you that I certainly didn't funnel information. I don't even know what that means.
I think the allegation is that you tipped off Harvey Weinstein about his investigation. Jesse, come in.
He was well aware of Ronan Farrow's investigation because Ronan Farrow was talking to a lot of people. And so it was well known. It wasn't a secret. So I don't even understand that allegation. What Harvey Weinstein wanted to do was to talk to Ronan Farrow to give his side of the story. Most journalists would welcome that. He didn't want that. Okay, that's his choice, but Jesse. That's not any kind of a wrong or a crime. But I really can't comment on the case beyond that. I have said that even being connected with Harvey Weinstein in any way was a colossal mistake. I don't know any other high-profile attorneys who have ever withdrawn and apologized, but that's what I did because it was a mistake to be associated with him, like hundreds of people were at that time.
I don't mean to be obnoxious here, but in She Said, a book by Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey, they have Lisa's memos, her billing records. It's very well documented what Lisa did. It wasn't necessary for someone to call her and run anything by her. They had her documents.
But that's what fact checking is. And they don't have all of the documents. And they didn't run my statement either. So listen, I have said that I have tremendous respect for these journalists. What they were doing in secret during the time that I represented Mr. Weinstein later became public. As soon as it became public, I was as astonished as anyone about these secrets that were then revealed. And I withdrew, and I'm very sorry that I was ever connected with this man. But, you know, I was an attorney representing a client. Attorneys represent people who are flawed, who make mistakes. Many attorneys continue to represent Harvey Weinstein, and many attorneys represented him for years and years and knew a lot more than I ever knew. What I thought we were dealing with was inappropriate language. I got the man to apologize for that in a public statement. I thought that was a good thing. When this became about sexual assault, that was a whole different animal, and I immediately got out.
Let's go back to ABC now. And the network quickly identified the producer it believed leaked the tape of Amy Robach. ABC then contacted her new employer, CBS, which promptly fired her. Here is the 25-year-old Ashley Bianco talking to a former news anchor, Megan Kelly.
Wasn't me. I'm not the whistleblower. I'm sorry to ABC, but the leaker's still inside. It's not, I never did any of that. I may have accessed it, but I never leaked it. I never showed it to anyone. I didn't talk about the situation outside the company.
Back to Lisa. Lisa, we don't know if Ashley Bianco leaked the video, but we can see how the big networks react when they suspect they've been betrayed. What does that tell you about the culture in the media industry in New York?
Right. So as the owner of one of the biggest civil rights law firms in the country, we've had cases against all of the major networks on behalf of workers like this young woman who claims that she was wrongfully terminated. My concern is the speed with which she was terminated. Surely ABC did not do a full and fair investigation into what happened within a matter of hours or one day or whatever the short time period was. And in fairness to her and to everybody else, that's what should have happened. She says she didn't do it. I don't know what the truth is, but I know that they certainly rushed to judgment against her.
Lisa, regardless of whether or not she actually leaked the tape, what does it tell us about the big networks and how much they allow people further down the chain to really, express themselves? I mean, this is important, isn't it? Because people would be reluctant to come forward and report wrongdoings if they know they're going to be crushed in this way.
Well, that's an interesting point, because the one who made the statement, Amy Robach, is still there, and it's this much lower level producer who's taken the fall, apparently on very quick decision-making timetable. The only fair thing to do would have been to have an in-depth investigation. And does this woman get her job back if they do that investigation now? I mean, in fairness, I think she should.
Jesse?
I had the misfortune of being in a hospital waiting room for several hours yesterday morning. This television was tuned to ABC. ABC, as you know, is now joined at the hip with Disney. Every single show was basically included. Every single show included a commercial for Disney Plus. Even on the news, there was a feature about the introduction of Disney Plus. So to say that ABC is primarily interested in news, I think, to me, feels overstated. I think it's primarily interested in commerce, and that comes as its highest priority.
Let's turn to the second of our questions now. Did Epstein commit suicide, which is the official account, or was he murdered? Epstein was found dead on August the 10th this year in a New York jail cell, and his death immediately sparked a flurry of conspiracy theories. And you can see why.
A lot went wrong in New York City's Metropolitan Correctional Center during Epstein's time there. So much so that the US Attorney General launched an investigation citing serious irregularities. For starters, Epstein was meant to have a cellmate at all times, but just hours before his death, his cellmate was transferred out and not replaced. Also, Epstein was placed on suicide watch after being found unresponsive with injuries to his neck in late July. But he was taken off the list just 6 days later. Even after being taken off suicide watch, Epstein's cell was meant to be checked every 30 minutes by a guard. But at the time of his death, the guards had fallen asleep and the cell wasn't checked for 3 hours. And while there are no cameras inside the cells, the two placed outside are impossible to check because both of them malfunctioned that night.
Well, in addition to all that, we have Michael Barton, a well-regarded forensic pathologist, and he explains why he thinks it might be murder.
Are you saying you don't think it was suicide?
I think that the evidence points toward homicide rather than suicide.
Why?
Because there are multiple 3 fractures in the hyoid bone, the thyroid cartilage, that are very unusual for suicide and more indicative of strangulation, homicidal strangulation.
Back up to Jesse Cornbluth. Jesse, when we did the show, the first show on Jeffrey Epstein, after he'd been arrested and put into prison, a lot of the people who made comments on our YouTube channel said he'll never make it to trial. Powerful people will get to him. What do you think they meant by that?
Well, we have all watched hundreds of hours of police shows and read bushels of thrillers. What we instinctively believe is that everything is a conspiracy, that the fix is always in. The fact is that isn't always the case. There is human error. What's noticeable in this particular story is how much human error there is. And therefore, you have to ask. But the likelihood of us finding out, well, Fox will find out, because Fox will find out that Hillary Clinton strangled Jeffrey in his cell.
Well, she can't be everywhere at once, surely. Lisa, as a legal mind, you look at all these mishaps in jail, and you look at the fact that before he killed himself, he apparently was unresponsive with a neck injury. Do you find it conceivable that this could have been allowed to happen in a Manhattan jail?
Well, if it was allowed to happen, meaning the suicide, I think human error is the normal explanation for things going wrong, but there's just too much human error here. There's too many coincidences, and I don't believe in coincidences. Both cameras are not working. How hard is it in 2019 to have a working camera? We all have them on our phones, our iPads, our computers. We all own about 10 working cameras. They couldn't have one working camera on this high-profile guy who had previously attempted suicide. Come on. I do not buy it. I think it is likely there's a homicide, or, as some of my clients think, perhaps he's not even dead at all. Perhaps he was spirited away and somebody else's body was replaced.
Are you serious?
That's a crazy theory, I admit. But it's also crazy to suggest that this man molested hundreds or perhaps thousands of girls with the help of a lot of high-profile people. And that is what turns out to be a factual situation.
Yeah, you talk about high-profile people. Let's move on. You know, ABC's anchor claims that the British royal family put pressure on her network to ditch the story.
The palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story.
The palace hasn't commented on the accusation so far, but bear in mind that Virginia Roberts accuses Epstein of sex trafficking her to Prince Andrew on 3 separate occasions.
He danced with me, and he sweats a lot, and he smells funny. And then we get in the car, and Gillian tells me in the car that I have to do what I do for Jeffrey for Prince Andrew. And that's when I learned what was going to happen.
And he was seen with Epstein a decade later, after he was convicted of sex offenses with a minor. So, Lisa, coming back to you, has the case gone cold, gone dead with Epstein, or does it continue? And are high-profile people like Prince Andrew still in the lawyers' sights?
They're definitely still in my sights and my team's sights. We have filed 2 lawsuits against not only Jeffrey Epstein, but one of his recruiters. We're on the verge of filing several others. And I think those who knew that he was molesting girls and young women and who actively assisted him in that should come forward and tell us what they know. And if they don't, we're going to subpoena them and get the information.
Lisa, bear in mind that Prince Andrew's released a statement saying, "I deplore the exploitation of any human being and would not condone, participate, or encourage any such behavior." You haven't got a chance of getting the prince to a New York court, have you, and giving a deposition?
Well, we do not have any allegations on behalf of my 5 clients against Prince Andrew. But if others do, I think that they may very well be able to go to the UK and take his deposition. I don't know. Listen, his denial is there. I don't know the facts as to what he did. I think we do have to be careful about just, accusing people without corroboration. But in his case, there is a photograph of him with Virginia Roberts when she was underage. That should be the beginning of the inquiry.
Jesse, a final question for you. You did know Jeffrey Epstein. back in, what was it, the 80s? And he made
Yes,
an indecent proposal to your fiancée on the eve of your wedding. We know that story already. But from what you know of him, do you think he had it in him to kill himself?
The one thing I can say as a novelist, which is what I do now, is that having created a trust a few days before, which protected his assets, it is possible that Jeffrey made a calculated business decision that he was going to be finally humiliated by everyone he cared about, that he was going to spend 30 to 40 years, the rest of his life in jail, and decided, as I say, in a calculated decision to kill himself. Possible.
Jesse Kornbluth and Lisa Bloom, thank you both for your analysis here on The Nexus today. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Do appreciate it. We have run out of time, so till next week, goodbye.